what would I tell the projector? The projector. The projector who really wants success. That's what they're looking for, right? Well, I saw earlier today that Erin Claire Jones, herself a projector, was saying, that she had followed the discipline of sending out one social media marketing message every day for a year, and was kind of recommending this to another projector. I didn't witness it, so I don't want to, that's hearsay, but I don't want to go too far with that. But just this idea, whoever said it for, whatever reason, should the projector be out there, shilling and pushing and so on? Well, sure, there might be some ego projector 4426 who's like, that sweet smell of success, that's the love of success, the love of talent. So I'm not saying there's not going to be a projector out there who isn't, kind of capitalist version, right? Or like the 3740 projector, the communist version, and so on. But it actually got me thinking, what advice would I give a projector, right? What do I do when a projector comes to me? Well, at a fundamental level, I do what I do for anyone who comes to me for human design. I basically want to grab them by the shoulders and kind of shake them. And grab them by the shoulders and shake them and say, look at this, And what I'm trying to do that for with a projector, it's going to really depend. The projector has the widest variety of authority, but let's say they have an undefined G center. I'm going to be shaking them and saying, look, these people in your life are not your people. You can test if they're your people or not, and you can see if they're really your people. But just the fact, that they're hanging on to you, particularly if that person has an undefined spleen, I'm going to say, look, your undefined spleen, you're letting these people hang on to you and so on with that undefined G and that undefined spleen. And, and I'm going to try to point to them and say, look, you're, trying to find where you should be. And that's a different thing than trying to look at who is in your life. And you know what I mean? Because as an undefined G center person, the quality of the person in your life is so directly going to, impact your quality of life, particularly as a projector. An undefined G generator might be able to get away from it if they're satisfied with how their energy is going otherwise, although I don't recommend it. And an undefined G manifester, or the reflector, they're going to have primary relationships with the cosmos anyway. Although I have seen, it's absolutely the undefined G center rule is just every bit as much true. In some sense, even more so for someone like the reflector or someone like a mental projector, even though they are very, very different. And I don't want to say that they're the same, but when you get in the case of the reflector or the mental projector, you actually have, the undefined G center being a very important aspect of that whole mechanic. But in any case, what I'm saying is what I would be kind of shaking that projector and pointing them at, or it might be at the split, where that split is in their chart, right? That bridging gate. And I'm shaking them and pointing and saying, look at that bridging gate. Look right there. Don't you see how that bridging gate is organizing your decision making right now? That bridging gate is making you, decide to take this job and date that person and live in this apartment in that city or that town, right? So that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to do with the projector. I'm really trying to get them to see the not self at work, and then especially to see it in terms of invitation. I don't want to make a hard, fast, dogmatic rule. As much as I am dogmatic, I don't like the idea of, simply because language is so multivalent, right? Multiple values, multiple meanings. Because language has so many multiple meanings, I don't want to make a dogmatic rule that says that the projector should never invite. But in a very specific meaning of the term invitation, a projector should never invite. Look, I was invited by some projectors recently to be on their show. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? I'm talking about the idea of counter-inviting as almost a mode of control over the situation due to a lack of trust from not having been given carte blanche, not having been given the keys to the castle, so that the projector is essentially taking countermeasures to protect against their own lack of invitation from the other. And that's because there's so many fake invitations. I love Lavina Archer's work because Lavina Lovick Archer, she's done fantastic work as a projector herself, talking about invitation and the mechanics of invitation, and all of her experiments as a third line, right, with invitation. And so as a projector, I would say, learn how to distinguish the different senses of the term invitation, and also learn kind of what Ra meant, or try to build an understanding of what he meant. See, when we embark on a metaphysical research program, we are learning a bunch of new words. We're learning a new language. We're being given these new buckets to fill with life experience and the results of our experiments. And those two things, the experience and the experiments, I guess also we could say the knowledge one gains spontaneously through inner knowing, those things are what the human design experiment is all about, right? So as a projector, I'm going to be showing you where the not self is, so you can see the not self decision making. Then as you see it, as you sort of loosen up the grip on initiating decision making and pushing yourself so hard with these not self themes and so on, and burning out, what's going to end up happening is this whole dynamic comes into clarity. And what the dynamic is that if you are a projector and you have the right person in your life, that person gives you the keys to the castle, period. The keys to the castle. It's like Lance Reddick's character in The Wire, when he comes back in season 3 of The Wire, and he's been brought back together and brought back in because they needed him. It's like the spurned projector who wasn't really invited, who wasn't really given the power, who then goes away, and then they beg them to come back. Pretty please, we're inviting you, we're begging you, please come, please come, please come. I've been at the party like that. Please come, please come, please come to the projector, because I really, really want to see them. Begging them. How's that for an energetic invitation? But if they show up and then you don't give them the keys to the castle in some sense, if you don't give them in some meaningful sense, it's just like Lance Reddick's character in The Wire, where the police chief gets him back in, he's back in charge, he's put together the whole program, they're making great progress, they're doing great work, and then he doesn't have the funds, and he doesn't have the actual power, and the actual hours, and so on. And so he goes to the chief and he says, "You brought me in because you want results. Well, let me do my job. Let the projector do their job. Their job's not to work, but they still have a job. Just because your job doesn't, involve work doesn't mean you don't have a job to do, right? We all have a job to do. And it's not the projector's job to do all the work, right? It's not the projector's job to fight against the resistance from not having carte blanche, from not having the keys to the castle, from not having a legitimate invitation that actually includes with it the power to guide that process and to guide and direct the work, right? So that's what it's really about. You start to see that, then the projector counter-invites. So the projector starts to get bitter about things and goes, no, I'm not going to accept these invitations because then I'm on their turf. Then they're in control. At least if I invite, I have my parameters. I can choose to shut the party down at 9 p.m. I've seen projectors do this. The worst parties ever. Never let a projector throw their own birthday party. Just doesn't work. I've been to them. So, you're going to find out that there's many meanings to invitation, but that it's absolutely true that there's a form of invitation that a projector should never do. And that invitation can be because they have so much almost PTSD from being fake invited and being overlooked and being ignored and being, not given the actual resources that were sort of on the jacket. So they're hired to do a job, and then they find out that they don't actually have the power to do that job because they weren't actually recognized, and they get bitter. So then they say, well, instead, I'm going to make my business. I'm going to invite you to work for me, right? And that can work. They can be a projector that is a hanging 44 that's constantly scouting for that talent and so on. But I'm just saying, what I do with the projector, because that's how I got on this whole thing. I was like, what would I actually do as a generalized, because there's so many different kinds of projectors. Well, the first thing I would do, is I would start looking at where the not self is. If they're split definition or if they're quad split, I'd look at the bridging gate or gates. If they're wide split, I look at the channel. If they're really very wide, I look at the center. If they're single definition or triple split, I'm going to be looking at the undefined centers. I'm going to be doing the not self hierarchy, where I start with the undefined ego because that's the strongest. If that's defined, I move on to the undefined solar plexus, and so on through that not self hierarchy, which goes ego, solar plexus, G center, spleen, ajna, head, sacral, root, throat, root, sacral, throat, I believe. So the throat is kind of the outermost for everyone, and the sacral is the second most, outermost, meaning the second weakest not self center. Now, I don't mean to imply that, these centers, even the throat, if that's the only undefined center, then that is, in that person's single definition or triple split, then there is somebody who their entire life is wrapped up in the undefined throat. So I don't mean to minimize that. But, you're not going to find a projector like that. There are no projectors for whom the throat is the core issue. The sacral will always be more of an issue. But even that is only 8th in the hierarchy. So say you're a single definition or triple split projector, and you have undefined, G center, but you have a defined solar plexus and a defined ego. Well, that undefined G center then becomes the core of your not self. The absolute core of it. So that's the first thing I do with the projector. It's the first thing I do with everyone, right? That's what I was saying. But with the projector, I kind of look for that. I don't always start there. I might start talking to them about profile, or start talking to them about variable if they're, quad right, or have a predominantly right, or even just if they have a right mind. So, I start a lot of different places. But the thing I'm looking at out of the gate is, where's the not self here? And I'm trying to, on my own metaphysical research program, learn how to recognize that form of mental decision making, that form of the not self, that not self hierarchy, if you will. So I'm always learning. And every time I get a split definition person who has an undefined bridging gate, I love learning from them. I learn so much about the not self from them. And I get to hear their experiences with it and so on. So, which of course evolves into the wisdom, because these not self centers are where we really get wise. We kind of go to school in life. So I do get to learn what all the different emotional channels feel like in some sense with my completely undefined solar plexus, and so on. So that's the first thing. Then I really do want to look at, I will usually if a projector comes to me for a paid reading, what they're paying me for is all of the 5th line practical advice I can muster, every last bit of it, along with all of the 1st line deep research I can muster, every last bit of that. So it stretches me in both directions, right? And that stretch I take very seriously. And anyone who's had a reading from me, a paid reading, mind, knows that it's very different than my off-the-cuff readings. I might do some of the same things, but I discover for just about every reading, I can't really do the reading until I've discovered something really interesting, or, until I've kind of feel like I have some handle on it. And it sometimes takes me weeks. It's brutal. It's a brutal process because it's so hard sometimes to figure out exactly, how something is going to present. And I take it so seriously when it's a paid reading. When it's a free reading here, these are more like the practice readings where I get to kind of, and I'm hoping to do more, by the way. I have a lot of people in the queue, and, please continue to send your charts, and I'm doing them in the order received, for the most part. Every now and then there'll be one that skips ahead because, it's so topical to something I just did, or it's something entirely new, like a penta analysis, which I'm hoping to do more of. So in those cases, I have to kind of give them preferential treatment. But, the first thing I look at is the not self, try to find where that is. And that is where the person's going to make the decisions. That's where the bitterness is going to be. And then from there, I like to look. I also really like to do color right away. Color, I do like actual outer authority motivation, because I feel like for projectors, outer authority is so important for them. And pulling them and aligning them into their correct color while it does happen spontaneously, can also be something interesting to observe by knowing what that color is. I'm talking about the personality sun-earth color, the motivation. And then I'll just leave one final point, is that I start projectors off with partnership analysis right away, with the notion that they really are here to learn about the other and to know the other deeply. What advice would you give to a projector in their first year of human design?
Stop working. Don't go to work anymore.
Really? I mean, is that... Okay.
Well, what? There's a million places to go with it. You can't give generic advice to one aura type. You have to look at a chart.
Well, but where do you start then? Okay, good answer. So where do you start though? In the chart then.
Where do you start in the chart? Well, so after you give them the basic projector outline, I suppose you'd go to open centers. Unless they're a simple split, you would look at bridging gates first. I guess if they're a triple split, you'd probably mention that pretty early on. Single defs and people, even simple splits whose split is bridged in like 6 or 7 different ways or something, when that happens, I feel like that's not that imperative. But I say start with the open centers, because it's like you automatically become who you are when you clarify who you're not. And so it's just like cleaning the gunk off a lens. When you disrupt the not self narrative of the open centers, then you automatically begin to express your channels in more and more definition, and more visibility, and then it makes you easier to be recognized and easier to be invited.
The trippy thought that I always have and that's a great point about being more invitable. The trippy thought I always have about the channels are that when you first look at the human design chart, you're like, wow, this is me. And there's this wanting to be everything. And then when you kind of just get into the limitation of the actual life force, the actual aura, that's just the channels. That's not even the gates, really. I mean, the gates might put a requirement on it. If somebody has gate 5, and then they also have 659, they might have a fixed rhythm to their intimacy or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but that 659, that's the aura, okay? You're not really feeling that gate 5 unless you have the 15 hanging, because then your whole life you'll be meeting those 5s on the other end. So I guess what I was saying is there's this trippy idea, to me, that you really kind of become so limited, like in your chart, but you become so differentiated in that life force energy and the quality of that energy. That's what makes you invitable as a projector, is what you're saying, right? Or
you become a pure expression of what you are offering, what you are contributing through your energetic signature.
More pure. That's a great way to say it. It's a pure expression because you're kind of able to notice when the not self theme acts up, kind of the autonomous complex.
Totally.
Well, okay, here's my other questions though. So I was thinking around, where do projectors look? And I was thinking the people in their life, whereas for generators it's more where they're putting their energy. And the people, I mean, maybe it's not true, right? Especially maybe if you're a self-projected projector, or just otherwise. I mean, there are some very independent designs, obviously. I mean, you're a 6-line projector on the roof. You might not necessarily think of people quality, but what I do believe in some significant way is that the quality of the people in the life of the projector directly affect the quality of life for the projector.
Yeah, of course, because
more than for a generator though, because a generator, depending on their configuration, can put up with having a bad housemate in a different way that a projector can't, because the generator can still be using their energy in a way that's deeply satisfying, even when they have kind of quote unquote the wrong people around them.
I don't think a generator is really eating the aura of other people as deeply or as focusedly as a projector is, right? Because if you're a projector with one roommate, then it's like every time you pay attention to that roommate, that's like the main thing that you're honing in on.
And if you're a 4th-line projector who invests so heavily in people, for instance, 4th lines are known for investing deeply in others, and I always tell 4th lines, make sure you're getting a good ROI, make sure you're getting a good return back in your access to the resources from that friend of yours, because you're putting everything into that friendship. But as a projector, they're putting everything into that friendship and focusing deeply on investing in that other person and guiding that other person. And then, you know, this is not going to be everyone, right? There's going to be special relationships. Like, I don't know if projector relationships have that quality. I'm kind of talking about maybe projector manifester, but definitely projector generator or projector manifesting generator. But the relationship seems so specific anyway in the ways, you know, it's a fascinating thing to me. So, well, okay, so maybe not necessarily, you know, do some mental thing about who are the people in my life. Like, the other thing I found is doing partnership analysis, the not self, the mind, is typically, you know, always ready to react, where if they're split definition, it's always ready to compromise. And if they're not, it's always ready to walk, you know? And there's this kind of way that I do think it's very important. Like, in that first year projector thing, I would say, okay, like, yeah, as you're kind of getting in touch with your strategy and authority, as you're experimenting with that, one of the things that you will naturally notice is that you become really sensitive to the people in your life, and you become really acutely aware of, like, maybe these are bad examples, maybe I'm just a generator who doesn't really get it, but I was thinking of examples of, like, giving a projector a gift that really doesn't fit them as a person, and makes it clear to them that you see them in a certain way that's really distasteful to them. Or, like, another version of it, not saying these are the ultimate
showing
versions,
them examples of your lack of recognition.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
And, like, publicly demonstrating the lack of recognition of the, you know. So, I mean, I'm just saying, like, and of course there's very much deeper in its ways and more personal ways. I mean, I think recognition is one of those multivalent keywords or keynotes that really operates on so many levels that you can see, almost depending where the fractal line is, that people who are, you know, not as ready to go into that mutative, extremely experimental place, they're just, you know, more looking for the success of money or the recognition of, you know, fame. And I really see it with, you know, bitter projectors in the music industry who feel so unrecognized and feel like the music industry is a sham and all this stuff. And it's definitely the projector sentiment of bitterness and all of that. But what they really want is it's almost like what they think they want and what they really want are different, right? This is what Lacan teaches us, that our unconscious desire is not what we think, right? So we think, the projector thinks that they really just want to be famous, then they get the fame, and then they're just a slave to the fame. Yeah. They're a super slave to the fame because they have to keep up with the fame, and it becomes a huge burden. So the real success and recognition and so on has to do with the quality of the person in your life. And it's like, I think if you ever defined G center, you know, you're lucky in some sense, because you'll naturally, even though you might struggle if you have undefined spleen with, you know, not letting go of the wrong people in your life, you'll at least know they're the wrong people with that G center. You'll be driven away from them. You might have an undefined solar plexus and be afraid to confront them and tell them they're not the right person for you and you don't want to hang out with them, you know. But again, I'm not saying projectors should initiate this, because it kind of just naturally happens. And I think that from my perspective as an outsider, what I see the projector needs more than anything is generators and manifestors who really trust them and give them the keys to the castle, so to speak. Is what I talk about, is I call it carte blanche. Because if you're really giving somebody carte blanche, you're really trusting them to make the decisions and putting your faith in them. Right. And if you read the projected channels, like you have channel the alpha, channel leadership, it's all about being recognized and elected as a leader. You can't just go out there and manifest and say, I'm the leader, you know, the way that the 4521 does. It goes out there and says, bang, bang, I'm the boss.
Right. Very different kind of leadership.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is, in that first year, no, I absolutely think the deconditioning...
I think that's literally the channel of monarchy and the channel of democracy, those two. 731 is, according to Ra, the only channel of democracy.
Oh, that's
and
great,
the 4521
So,
being the channel
right.
of monarchy.
You have the 731, That's so great. I had no idea about that. I know the channel of capitalism and communism, the 4426 and the 3740 respectively.
Oh, nice.
Those make sense because the communist channel is the one as part of the whole and so on.
And weirdly, I think the socialism channel is the 1949.
Interesting. They're all projected.
Yeah.
Oh no, except for the manifested one. The one manifested channel.